From the icy surface of Helska to the fields of Dantooine and beyond, the Yuuzhan Vong have continued to spread through the Outer Rim. As the conflict escalates, old prejudices are re-examined as the Star Wars galaxy decides how to best meet this new foe. Welcome to the Wizards and Warriors channel, where today we are continuing our coverage of the Yuuzhan Vong War, with the internal struggles of the New Republic and the entrance of the Empire, as well as the Battle of Ithor. We've also got some info from our own galaxy and from the future, because the Strange New Worlds expansion is now landing in the sponsor of this video, Star Trek Fleet Command, available for free on desktop or mobile right now via our links in the description. Star Trek Fleet Command is an award-winning 4X MMO in which you play as a new independent commander. You build your starbase and crew while warping off on dramatic assignments and engaging in the galaxy's evolving wars. And now there's a new arc just beginning, with the Strange New Worlds Flashpoint content drop, in which you will be reshaping the galaxy through new missions, a load of gameplay enhancements, and 3 new officers from Strange New Worlds: Scotty, the engineering prodigy, T'Pring, the precise Vulcan strategist, and T'Chok, the fearsome frontline warrior. Alongside all that, you can now watch the new Star Trek Fleet Command animated short on YouTube. Featuring LeVar Burton as Geordi LaForge, it covers the events leading up to the beginning of the game's main campaign. So if you're new to the game especially, give that a watch while you install to get up to speed before your own role in the story kicks in. Another bonus if you're new is a 7-day login bonus event, where you can get loads of goodies for logging in 7 days in a row, including the epic Romulan Captain Nero, whose 40% damage buff will give you much better results in the adventures you're about to face. Download the game for free on desktop or mobile right now, and also use the promo code KhanRules to get the original series Kirk in your crew for free right away. The galaxy's gonna need him, so get your crew out there now. The brutal Battle of Dantooine, covered in our last episode, eliminated any doubt in the minds of those present that the Yuuzhan Vong threat was growing and could not be ignored. Admiral Trace Crefay, Colonel Gavin Darklighter of Rogue Squadron, Kamasi Senator Eligos Akla, and unofficial spokesperson for the refugees displaced thus far, Leia Organa Solo, quickly returned to Coruscant to confront Chief of State Bossk Fey'lya and his cabinet, hoping to push him to finally act. Crefay and Darklighter revealed their knowledge of several other attacks hidden by Fey'lya, even from the military, on various Outer Rim worlds, including strikes on planets like Selene, Begis, Garqi, and Artorias. Crefay threatened that he would abscond with the New Republic military to the unknown regions if Bossk continued to hide the extent of the invasion, and failed to support the military in acting against the Yuuzhan Vong, forcing the obstinate chief to relent. Senator Akla was allowed to give a full report on the invasion to the Senate, although this was not to be the end of the problems in acquiring proper support for the besieged Outer Rim. Partially as a result of this more open communication, a clearer picture began to emerge of the state of the Outer Rim territories. Several New Republic worlds had been taken along their border with the Imperial remnant. Shadow Shai and his flagship, the Legacy of Torment, a massive Korchok Grand Cruiser of similar scale to the classic Imperial Super Star Destroyers, had established headquarters on Debrillion, and their operations had reached as far south as Garqi, at the bottom edge of Imperial territory. The New Republic's forces in this region of the Outer Rim had also mobilized under Trace Crefay's command. They used the planet Agamar, already key for refugee relocation efforts, as a staging ground to patrol nearby systems and continue evacuations where possible. Meanwhile, Leia and Senator Akla were attempting 2 diplomatic missions. Leia, in an unofficial capacity, tried to convince Imperial Grand Admiral Gilad Pellaeon and the Moff Council to ally with the New Republic in the fight against the Yuuzhan Vong, given their proximity to the invasion vector. Senator Akla would be undertaking a far more dangerous mission to Debrillion, hoping to negotiate with Shadow Shai and learn what exactly the Yuuzhan Vong actually wanted, potentially allowing all sides to avoid escalating the already devastating war. Leia, escorted by Celestin Admiral Aril Numb and the Victory Star Destroyer Protector, arrived at the Imperial capital on the planet Sartananian, now called Bastion. Gilad Pellaeon revealed the Empire was aware of much of what had transpired, but that while he was sympathetic, many of the more paranoid elements of the Imperial leadership feared the Yuuzhan Vong war would merely be used as a pretext to lure out Imperial fleets, allowing the much larger New Republic to easily invade the Imperial rump state. Nevertheless, Pellaeon promised to present Leia's case to the Moffs. After Leia departed, Pellaeon did indeed address the Moffs. Instead of trying to convince them to help the New Republic, he simply informed them that as the Supreme Commander of the Imperial forces, he had chosen to assist. he expected their cooperation in convincing their subjects that this was the correct course of action, despite significant protest from several Moffs. Pellaeon understood that the New Republic's fall would leave an isolated empire, without a hope of withstanding the inevitable Yuuzhan Vong attack. Many Moffs conversely believed that either the Yuuzhan Vong would leave them alone, or simply took pleasure in the idea of the New Republic falling, allowing the opportunity for the Empire to reassert control. Still, they all fell in line behind Pellaeon, if only begrudgingly. Having secured the tenuous cooperation of the Moffs, Pellaeon began preparing the Imperial forces. Back in the New Republic, Bossk-Fey'lya had insisted that the Jedi would not be involved, or sanctioned by the New Republic in their efforts. He feared a Jedi power grab, and the perception in the New Republic that the Jedi were often reckless in their self-directed police actions. Luke and the Jedi, who barely numbered in the hundreds, secretly approved of this choice, thinking it would untie their hands and prevent them from being thrown as a thin front line against overwhelming enemies, as happened in the Clone Wars. The Jedi were also fracturing into two camps. One, informally led by Jedi Master Kip Duran, wanted to pursue the Yuuzhan Vong aggressively, and the other, which believed the Jedi needed to choose the method of their involvement more carefully, lest they fall to the dark side, led by Luke Skywalker and Masters Corran Horn and Kenth Hamner. Despite this internal discontent, one of the New Republic's first scouting missions would have significant Jedi involvement. Jedi Master Corran Horn had been a former Rogue Squadron pilot, and he was called back into active duty to lead a commando team to the planet Garqi, which was famous for its agricultural output and suspected to be under Yuuzhan Vong control. Corran already had first-hand experience with the Yuuzhan Vong, having encountered them on a mission to Bimial shortly before, where, unbeknownst to him, he had earned the ire of Shadao Shai by killing 2 members of his domain and disturbing the remains of a third, who had been present as an early scout in the galaxy since 50 years before the actual invasion. The Jedi was joined by 6 Noghri commandos and 2 civilian observers, a role filled by the Jedi Ganna Rasod, who belonged to Kip's more aggressive faction, and Jacen Solo. In order to infiltrate Garqi undetected, the 3 Jedi and 6 Noghri would be aboard a shuttle called the Best Chance, which itself would be inside a larger, mostly decrepit freighter called the Lost Hope. Crefay's personal flagship, Ral Roost, headed for Garqi, with the Lost Hope aboard in its hangar. When they arrived, the Lost Hope deployed and began heading for the planet, although they were quickly beset by 10 coral skippers. Now officially including Jacen's sister Jaina, Rogue Squadron attempted to cover the Lost Hope. The Lost Hope exploded as it drifted towards the planet, as planned, allowing Best Chance to make planetfall in relative safety, covered by Lost Hope's debris, while Ral Roost and Rogue Squadron retreated. During their first week, they managed to move the Best Chance to an agri-combine facility 40 kilometers north of the planet's capital, Hesksta, storing the ship in buildings originally used for harvester droids, all of whom were melted down by the Yuuzhan Vong due to their hatred of inorganic technology. Corran was able to make contact with Raid Dromath, the leader of the Garqi resistance. He was a local whose mother, former Rogue Squadron member Dinba Tesk, had been killed in the initial Yuuzhan Vong landings. Both men gathered their parties and set out to scout the capital, particularly around the agricultural university on the capital's outskirts. There they saw the horrifying project the Yuuzhan Vong were undertaking. Like on Belkadam, the Yuuzhan Vong were implanting the local population with slave coral seeds. Many of them were used to harvest crops, since the Yuuzhan Vong destroyed the droids, but others, including the group seen by Raid and Corran, were being transformed into enthralled soldiers, able to be controlled by the Yuuzhan Vong through their implants. Raid informed Corran's group that there had been several iterations of these soldiers, and they were sent into the city for Yuuzhan Vong and their Chesrach warrior slaves to hunt down, with each successive generation of slave seed implanted locals showing more promise. The Jedi, knowing a rescue would be too risky, planned to infiltrate the city during one of these hunts, hoping to capture some of the test subjects at a point where their disappearance would be chalked up to dying in the hunt. During the next hunt, they began to execute their plan, capturing 2 of the enthralled humans and loading them onto vehicles to return to their ship. Their retreat took them into a sector of the university's grounds which contained specimens from the planet Ithor, including a grove of semi-intelligent Bafor trees. The Jedi hoped they would be able to use the Force to connect with the trees in the grove, and track Yuuzhan Vong movements that way. They were soon confronted by Krag Val, commander of the Vong on Garqi, with a group of warriors and thralls. A fight ensued where the thralls were quickly eliminated, leaving the Jedi, Resistance and Noghri in nearly even numbers with Val and his warriors. As the fight continued though, the warriors' living armor began to swell, restricting their motion. The Bafor trees had been covering the area in pollen, and the Yuuzhan Vong technology was experiencing a deadly allergic reaction. With this new knowledge that could turn the course of the war in hand, the party quickly departed the planet on the best chance, knowing they needed to put all available resources towards the defense of Ithor. Once in orbit, they needed to rendezvous with Ral Roast, given Best Chance lacked its own hyperdrive. But as they approached Ral Roost's hangar, a Yuuzhan Vong fleet emerged to stop them, consisting of one cruiser, the Burning Pride, flagship of Shadao Shai's subordinate Dane Lian, along with 6 corvettes and dozens of coral skippers. Shadao Shai had insisted on Dane Lian taking a sizable force to Garqi to check on Crag Val. His ongoing discussions with Elagos Akla had given him insight into his adversary Crefei, and he had learned not to underestimate the galaxy's inhabitants, thought of only as infidels by his compatriots. He now suspected that more had been at play with the prior strike on Garqi, where Lost Hope had been destroyed. Crefei, however, also suspected a trap and called in reinforcements, dubbed the Hammer Group. On top of Ral Roost and Rogue Squadron, Crefei's forces now included 2 Victory Star Destroyers and several further fighter squadrons, enough to hopefully cover Best Chance's recovery, yet still significantly outnumbered by Dane Lian's forces. This dynamic changed suddenly with new, even more unexpected appearances. Grand Admiral Gilad Pelayan had been aware of the prior attack and waited nearby for weeks for something like this engagement to happen. He quickly arrived aboard his flagship, the Imperial 2-class Star Destroyer Chimera, alongside the Victory Star Destroyer Red Harvest, and 3 squadrons of Chiss Clawcraft, on loan by the former Imperial Baron Soontir Fel to the New Republic, called Force Spike. They assisted Rogue Squadron in overwhelming the enemy coral skippers, while Chimera and Red Harvest turned the tide of the capital ship battle, destroying one of the Yuuzhan Vong corvettes and saving one of the New Republic's Victory Star Destroyers, Tanab Sunrise, as it was about to be overwhelmed. With Best Chance recovered, and not wanting to test the limits of their newfound advantage, Crefei and Pelayan withdrew. They headed for Ithor, where they met up with Master Luke Skywalker. Crefei had called for reinforcements, knowing a Yuuzhan Vong attack on Ithor would be imminent, but this call complicated matters somewhat, as Felea and several other ministers decided to travel to Ithor as well. Both Pelayan and Crefei understood that the political leadership of their respective sides would not necessarily appreciate their level of cooperation, so they hurried to exchange as much information as possible. The pair of military leaders, along with Masters Horn and Skywalker, discussed the possibility of planting Ithorian Bafor tree groves across the New Republic, or, more expediently, cloning or synthesizing the pollen to deploy against the Yuuzhan Vong. The Ithorian religion typically would forbid such offensive actions, but given the trees themselves willingly contributed pollen on Garqi, Ithorian leader R'hllal Torin agreed to allow the harvest of pollen and creation of new groves. Furthermore, the Ithorians lived in massive vessels called herd ships above the planet, and typically did not allow anyone on the planet's surface. Knowing the Yuuzhan Vong would not respect this tenet, ground teams for both specimen gathering and combat were permitted, provided they received a blessing and adhered to certain restrictions. The preparations which followed took place over a month and a half. The Imperial contribution would include 5 Imperial-class Star Destroyers, 8 Victory Star Destroyers, and assorted support vessels, stationed either directly at Ithor or the Imperial shipyard at Yagam Minor, where they could threaten Garqi. The New Republic force would be of similar size, stationed between Ithor and Agamar, where they would be protecting that world as well as threatening Garqi alongside the Imperial force. If the force at Agamar had to be entirely committed, it would mean Agamar would surely fall, cutting the newly minted allies off from one another. As the politicians of the New Republic and Empire arrived, Shadao Shai sent his own message, arriving on a coral-encrusted shuttle were the gold-plated bones of Elagos Akla. Shai had learned of the friendship between Elagos and Corran Horn, and as we have mentioned before, the Vong leader hated the Jedi. His message, sent with Elagos's bones, announced his intention to launch an assault on Ithor, where preparations had already progressed to a full-scale evacuation of the Ithorian herd ships. A massive Yuuzhan Vong armada arrived in system, including Shai's massive Legacy of Torment, 3 Mid Roik, 8 smaller Yorick-Vec light cruisers, a variety of Yorick Tremor troop carriers, along with swarms of coral skippers. In orbit, the battle opened with Rogue Squadron and other fighter units engaging the Vong Coral Skippers, as well as making attack runs on the Yurikvek light cruisers. The capital ship force of 5 Imperial Star Destroyers, 9 Victory Star Destroyers, 3 Bothan assault cruisers of the same type as Ral Roost, 1 Mon Calamari cruiser, and an assortment of support ships attempted to assault Legacy of Torment, though they found it difficult to inflict any damage on the large ship thanks to its significant amounts of Dovin Basal black hole shielding. The Yorick Tremor landers attempted to make planetfall all the while. The squads of Yuuzhan Vong soldiers who did manage to bypass the orbital screening forces were met with a team of Jedi and New Republic Defense Force troops led by Master Corran Horn. As the battle continued to escalate, Corran decided to use himself as bait. He challenged Shai to a duel on the planet's surface, offering Shai's ancestors' bones if Shai won, and guaranteeing Ithor's safety if Horn won. This secured a week-long truce to prepare, crucially giving the New Republic more time to continue evacuating the herd ships. At the scheduled time, a week later, Corran and Shai met on the planet's surface, accompanied by Dane Lian and Master Skywalker as witnesses. After an intense duel, Corran emerged victorious, slaying Shai and leaving Dane Lian to assume control of the Yuuzhan Vong fleet. The new Vong commander launched the plan he had been secretly preparing behind Shadao Shai's back, on orders from the Yuuzhan Vong's highest-ranking military commander, War Master Savong La, thus betraying the agreement. Lian sent 12 unique unmanned coral skippers, which locked onto Ithor and detonated themselves in the atmosphere, releasing bacteria that quickly began to cover the planet, multiplying and devastating the environment as the New Republic and Imperial fleets watched helplessly. With the devastation of Ithor underway, Dane Lian moved his fleet to the one outbound vector available, allowing Gilad Peleon to spring one final trap, hoping to avenge Ithor. The Allied forces had learned that the same Dovin basals used for generating defensive voids also controlled propulsion, so Peleon jumped the Immobilizer 418 interdictor cruiser Koroska Rainbow in near Ithor, using its gravity well generators to double the gravatic pull of Ithor, slowly but surely pulling in the Legacy of Torment towards the doomed planet. When the Dovin basals of Legacy of Torment began straining to pull the ship away, unable to generate defensive voids lest the ship fall into the atmosphere, the Allied capital ships took the opportunity to open fire. As the entire fleet hammered the ship and the Dovin basals failed, its ruined hulk entered the atmosphere, igniting on entry and quickly wreathing the highly oxygenated world in flame. Shadao Shai, Dane Lian, and the Legacy of Torment had all been defeated, but Ithor and its all-important Bafor trees were no more. Among many in the New Republic, Corran became seen as the man who killed Ithor because of his bargain, forcing him to withdraw from the Jedi Order to avoid bringing even more mistrust upon them. The Moffs, formerly cowed by Peleon's power play, used the failure to defend Ithor as a pretext to sever any further attempts at cooperation, something the New Republic leadership also insisted on, much to the disappointment of Crefei and Peleon. For now, the Yuuzhan Vong will continue their inexorable advance throughout the Outer Rim, as the fearsome War Master Savong La makes his arrival and drives his forces deeper towards the heart of the galaxy. But the Vong had potent weapons beyond their warriors, as we will see in the next video. In order not to miss it, subscribe and press the bell button to be notified when that and other videos on the Wizards and Warriors channel are released. Don't forget to comment. We'll try to read and respond to every comment, as we want to know what you think about this video and which videos you hope to see in the future. This is the Wizards and Warriors channel, and we'll catch you on the next one.